The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, welcome everyone to our InfoBurst webinar series. My name is Brianna Mustad with InfoSol, and I'll be hosting today's session. We'd like to welcome all of you to our kickoff webinar for 2019. Personally, I'm very excited that we're starting these up again, and we hope to deliver this year some fantastic topics on everything dedicated to InfoBurst. Also, we like to keep these, casual, interactive, definitely throughout the time. Please feel free to just enter in any questions or comments that you have, and I'll be happy to address them to our presenters today. I wanted to start off with some announcements for our InfoBurst community. We have, as I mentioned, a lineup of 2019 webinars that we'll be posting on our events.infosol.com website, as well as the help desk. So for those of you who've been following, Brian's done a great job of keeping our community up to date through the forum and announcements. So the webinars for InfoBurst will not only be hosted there and posted as they are continuing, but also our recordings will be sent out to everybody who dials in, as well as directing you to the help desk to view the recordings. And we always appreciate you socializing these webinars within your organization, keep others informed, or direct them to just registering for the next one. Our plan is to host them every 2 months, and we are definitely open to feedback and comments from you guys. So with our recording send outs and our announcements, definitely don't hesitate to reach out. Share with us your feedback on not only these webinars, but any topics that you would be very interested in and seeing in the future, as these are definitely dedicated to you. Also, the InfoBurst Experience has a brand new lineup of great 1-hour presentation tracks, as well as hands-on training opportunities. All of this is happening at IBIS 2019. We definitely like to bring the latest value and information about InfoBurst to the InfoBurst Experience at IBIS, and all of that information as far as the agenda, all of the topics, presenters, and the hands-on training opportunities can be found at attendibis.com, which we'll also be sharing with you. We have some great specials running. I know it's early in the year, but it's never too early to start considering IBIS as your not only business objects destination for training, but getting up to date with InfoBurst. So we'll be sure to share that information with you guys as well after the webinar concludes. So today's agenda, we're going to split it up into 2 parts. With me today is Bryan Baca and Rajesh Ponnurangam, both with InfoSol. We're going to start off with talking about InfoBurst schedules. Bryan will take us through advanced schedules using date macros, action based on schedule status, scheduling actions, priority schedule queue, system level schedule management. I hope I'm not stealing your thunder, Bryan, by going through all the details of your agenda, and then we'll be moving into Rajesh towards the end, who's going to be sharing with our audience what's coming in 2019. So this is going to be a great highlight of everything that you can expect moving forward with InfoBurst. And as I mentioned, we do want to save time for questions, so please don't hesitate to enter them in throughout the time, and then I'll be sure to address them to either Bryan or Rajesh at the end. All right, well, with that being said, I'd like to hand it over to Mr. Bryan Baca, who's going to be taking us through the tips and tricks of InfoBurst schedules. Welcome, Bryan.
Hey, Bree, thank you. Okay, if there are any issues seeing my screen, Bree, just let me know.
Okay, we could see it.
Okay, so my portion of today's webinar will be talking about InfoBurst scheduling. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Bryan Baca. I'm a member of the product support team here at InfoSol. I work with a lot of you regarding InfoBurst. So today we'll be talking about, and Bree talked about, advanced scheduling. I'd call it more scheduling tips and tricks. Outside of your normal usage of the InfoBurst scheduler, what else can you do to add value to your InfoBurst implementation? And I'm going to walk you through some of the things that our users have done with the scheduler above and beyond the simple implementation, as I said, to add more value to their InfoBurst solution. So let's, before we get started with let's call them tips and tricks, I thought we'd do kind of a scheduling refresher for those of you that aren't familiar with InfoBurst scheduling or haven't had opportunity to use it in your environment. So if you don't know, InfoBurst offers a very robust or advanced scheduling toolset, and we'll be looking at some of those features momentarily. Primarily, our users will use the InfoBurst scheduler to schedule their report, their BI report distribution through bursts, or their data cache refreshes through XDCs using the InfoBurst time and events-based scheduling frequencies. This is probably how most of you utilize scheduling today. The question is, what else can we do with the InfoBurst scheduler? And I'd like to show you a few of those tips and tricks now. So let's start with scheduling with date macros. As I said, the InfoBurst scheduler offers some advanced date time scheduling options, and I'll walk you through a few of those in a moment. So, scheduling on a daily basis, but only on select days and only between certain dates, or I want to schedule on certain days of the month, or hourly or by the minute schedule, things like this, or combining date time scheduling with event-based scheduling that says run a job starting at a certain time, but only if an event is true. These are the types of things we can do with the InfoBurst schedule. But there are some more what I call advanced scheduling requirements that can also be met with the scheduler through the use of the standard InfoBurst date macros. Users may already be aware that InfoBurst offers a suite of these macros that allow you to do things like automate the production of date values. It has other applications in bursting as well. But essentially, you can use this set of macros to resolve dates for scheduling that might be, let's call them more advanced or more obscure scheduling requirements. And I've given you some examples there below. So, for example, we want a burst to run on the first Thursday of the month, or maybe we need to refresh an XDC on the second to last day in quarter, or we want to run a job on the second weekday of the month. These are the types of scheduling requirements that we can achieve through use of the InfoBurst date macros. So let's jump into InfoBurst and look at how this is done. Okay. So let's start out just by building a schedule. So we'll just grab this daily churn reports burst and add it to a schedule. And Down here again at the bottom, just a quick refresher, in terms of the current scheduling or the standard scheduling frequencies, all the frequencies you're familiar with, daily at this time between these dates. We can add events, select days of the month, day intervals. We can schedule down to the hour and minutes, as I said, based on external events like trigger files or the results of a database query, or we can combine date, time, and event for more comprehensive schedules. But when these frequencies don't meet our scheduling needs, that's when we might look at use of the date macros in scheduling. So you see this option here at the bottom, frequency using macros. So we'll select that. And we still have control over, based on the date resolved by the macro, run it at this time between these dates. Maybe I want to use an event as well. But the key here is the use of one or more date macros to resolve our scheduling dates. So if we know our macros, and I don't expect many of you can type these in manually. I can't either. You can code them in here, or if you hit the M icon, you can just open up our macro builder. So this macro builder UI presents to us a list of the available date macros that we can use to build our schedules. So on the left-hand side, you see the list of macros. So for example, we can say first day in month. And when we select the macro, in the middle portion here, you'll see the actual macro syntax. We don't really need to know that. It's all drag and drop. But more importantly, this will describe the use of the macro. What does it do? So first day in month is obvious. It returns the first day in the current month. And then it will go on to talk about ways that we can manipulate that macro, specifically by employing math. And I'll show you some examples of that in a moment. So just know that for each macro, there is a detailed description of what it does, ways in which it might be used. Some of them are applicable to scheduling. A lot of what you see here is more applicable to things like content delivery with file naming and things like that. So let's talk then about the three examples I showed you in the slide. The first one was first Thursday in month. That's our requirement. So let's find that here. First weekday in month. Let's find. There are a lot of these to choose from. So we're looking for first. There it is. So we have, and there are a lot of macros in here, and I would add that most of what you see in this list are macros that were inspired by our users' requirements. So if as you start working with date macros for scheduling and you find that you have a requirement that the current macros don't currently need, please feel free to approach us through the help desk. Let us know what the requirement is, and we're more than happy, if applicable, to get those macros added to this list to make it a more comprehensive scheduler. So for our first requirement, first Thursday in month, we're using this first day of week in month macro. And when we select this, you can see it defines for us the actual days. So first Monday, first Tuesday, and on and on. So we actually want this one, first Thursday in month. So we can double click that to add it to this panel on the right, which is the edit mode. And from here, we can resolve. So today is Wednesday the 6th. And if we resolve this, so the first Thursday in current month is actually tomorrow, and that's 2/7. So we could build a schedule that says run this schedule on first Thursday of every month, and that's how this works. So we could hit apply here, and that adds the macro, or it lists the macro here, and then we can go on to add that to our list of macros, because as I mentioned earlier, you can actually utilize multiple macros in a schedule. We're not going to do that here today. Let's go back into the macro builder. We had a second requirement on our slide, which was second to last day in quarter. So if we go down here, we have here it is, last day in quarter. But we don't want the last day of the quarter. We want the second to last day of quarter. So what we're going to do is take an existing macro, last day in quarter, and perform some math on it. So here you can see in the description of the macro, the option to adjust the date based on day, workday, month, quarter, or year. So in this example, we'd like to say last day in quarter, and we want the second to last day. So we'd simply say -1D. And then we can resolve that, and that will give us the second to last day in quarter, which is March 30th. All right. Then our last requirement was second weekday of the month. So let's go find, where is it? It's up here somewhere. Here it is, first weekday in month. Let's go over here and get rid of this one. We'll add this to the editor. So first weekday in month for February was the 1st. And we would not use the argument plus 1, let's see, plus 1D, because that would give us February 2nd, which was actually Saturday. We don't want the next day of the month. We actually want the next weekday or working day of the month. So if we come back here to edit mode, instead of using plus 1D, we'll actually use plus 1K, which means plus 1 weekday, which will give us the second weekday of the month. We resolve that. That gives us our Monday date, which was the 4th. So these are just some examples of how you can use date macros to achieve more specific or advanced scheduling requirements. And as you work with this, as always, if you have questions or you have, as I said, suggestions for new macros, drop us a line in the help desk, and we're more than happy to work with you on those. Okay, let's move on to our next scheduling feature, which is the use of actions based on schedule status. So actions are things you can do with InfoBurst based on the status of the burst XDC, or in this instance, schedule, right? So a schedule status is the schedule started on start, the schedule completed successfully, which means all items in the schedule, either bursts or XDCs, completed successfully, or on abort, which means one or more items in the schedule failed. These are the three status that we can, to which we can apply an action. Those actions, and there are many of them, I've given you some of the key actions here on the slide, they include sending an email. So let's say I want to, and this is one of the more common usages of status actions, I want to send a notification to a user or group of users that something has failed. So in the screenshot you can see there, we've taken the abort status of our schedule and applied an email notification action that will send off an email to let a user know that something's happened with their schedule. We can execute a SQL query. So we can go off based on the status of the schedule, and maybe we're tracking job status in a table someplace outside of InfoBurst. We could write a query to send off to a table a status code or the name of a schedule or anything we want to do, updating, running a query based on the status of our schedule. Perhaps we have an external application that gets kicked off based on the presence of a trigger file on the network. InfoBurst can create that file based on schedule status. We can run an external program. I would say the most common application of this I see are InfoBurst users who will kick off their nightly ETL based on the status of the last schedule of the day. So upon completion of our last schedule of reports, InfoBurst will automatically go out and kick off the nightly ETL for you, right? And then lastly, we can run another schedule or a burst. And this gets used often for what I would call chain scheduling, right? So I have a schedule, let's say it runs 8 a.m. every day, and it's going to run a whole bunch of work. And I have other schedules that should not run until the first schedule of jobs has completed, which is variable. We don't know how long it's going to take for all of our bursts or XDCs to run. All we know is that we want another schedule of bursts or XDCs, or maybe individual bursts or XDCs, to run only after our schedule has completed. So I could create a run schedule, run burst, or run XDC action applied to the completed status of our first schedule, and then kick off our subsequent jobs in that manner versus everything being scheduled by date time. So let's go into InfoBurst then and take a quick look at use of an action based on a schedule status. So what I've got here, I've created ahead of time an email or what's called a send email action, and we'll open that. Via the help desk in our documentation, and also here in this list, you can see all the different actions that are available. We won't go through those now for time purposes. But I've configured kind of a generic send email action to send an email to, in this case, myself, but this could be any list of users you define. A notification where we can define, I've defined a custom subject. So this action could actually be applied to multiple schedules where we will dynamically insert the schedule name into the subject of that notification. I've also used the schedule name macro as part of the description of this email. And I've used another macro here that lists out our schedule items and their status. So you'll see an example of this in a moment. So this is just an example of what I can do with an action based on status. So my goal here is to send off this email anytime my schedule fails. So if we jump into our daily schedule here, I've applied that action on the abort status. So anytime anything in this schedule aborts, it'll send off an email notification to our defined users, and this is what that email might look like. So here we got our custom subject daily schedule, which is our schedule name, abort notification. Again, here was the schedule name macro, inserted our schedule name. And then here at the bottom, we have our schedule items. So it tells us we have a couple of bursts in our schedule, their name and location, and their status. So we can instantly see this burst in this schedule failed, and then we can start our investigation about that failure. All right, then let's move on to our next item, which is scheduling actions. So now that we've seen these actions in action, there are other things we can do with actions. So we can schedule the execution of select actions. It could be running a query or kicking off an external program or process using the InfoBurst scheduler. And what's key here is that you can do this without using the schedule in a traditional manner, which means adding bursts or XDCs, meaning you can literally create a schedule to go do something in your environment independent of bursts or XDCs, right? So I worked with a customer recently who had a very, they use InfoBurst widely in their environment. And they had this requirement where they've got this old legacy reporting system where they would generate hundreds of these report files, PDFs, things like that, out on a network share, right? But it was a very cumbersome reporting environment to manipulate and change things. And so what they said was, look, we got all these files that get produced on a daily basis out to a share folder, and we're decommissioning that network share, and we'd like users to go to this new share, but we don't want to go into that old reporting system and update hundreds of these definitions. What can we do with InfoBurst to solve this? And so what we came up with was they wrote a simple batch file that moved all the files from the old location to the new location, and then they built a schedule to kick off that batch file on a daily basis, right? So this is just an example of something that you can do to manage processes and other requirements in your environment using this existing InfoBurst scheduler. And I'll just show you a quick example of how that's done. So I've got my action predefined here. This is really simple. This is a run command action, and it simply defines where our command or process or batch file or whatever you're running is located, the name of that process. In this case, it's a simple batch file. And then from that, all I need to do is say new schedule. And what we'd like to do is we're going to run this, and we'll leave that as is. Let's say we want to run it at 6:28 p.m. every day. That's fine. We're going to add that run command action to the on start status of the schedule. We say move files, okay, and that's it. At this point, we obviously name the schedule. We can add this schedule to the system without having to add any bursts or XDCs, right? So we can add that, and give it a name. We'll just call this test. One thing you'll notice about the schedule icon is that normally the schedule icon would display what it contains, either a little burst icon or an XDC icon. This contains neither, so this is what that schedule icon would look like if all it's doing is running actions for you. Okay, let's move on to the priority schedule queue. Let's start this conversation by defining what queues are. So within a typical InfoBurst environment, you're going to have a platform that's connecting InfoBurst to, let's say, a business object server. Okay, and from that platform, I'm going to add Webby documents. Right, I have Webby documents, and I burst those and I deliver those. And that platform defines what's called a queue for Webby specifically, in every document type, that determines how many concurrent processing requests InfoBurst will send to business objects for that platform. I think the default is 25. So what that means is that regardless of how much work you schedule, bursts and Webby reports and all that stuff, at any given time, InfoBurst is only going to submit a maximum of 25 requests. And this is typically based on, some analysis that you've done to determine what is the maximum load that InfoBurst can put on my business object server, and then you adjust your queue accordingly. So then imagine a scenario where you have this schedule of critical reports. They must run on time regardless of any other considerations. To achieve this, you can leverage what's called the priority queue. Okay, so let's imagine a scenario where we've got our 25 queue slots. It's Monday morning and a lot of work is running, and all 25 slots are full. And maybe even you've got some jobs waiting in queue, right? So you've got a full queue and jobs waiting. And then here comes our priority schedule. Let's say it's scheduled at 8 a.m. and it comes into existence behind all of that other work. So it's not going to run when you want it. It's going to run only when it gets a queue slot, which it's variable, right? It's going to happen at any time. But you need that particular schedule to run on time. That's where you might leverage what's called the priority queue. The priority queue designates that one or more schedules are going to run independent of that queue. So my Webby queue is 25. If this particular schedule is put in the priority queue, it's going to run regardless of that full queue. Now, the one thing to keep in mind here is that you're exceeding what you've defined as kind of the maximum load that InfoBurst can send to business objects. So let's say my scheduled priority burst has 3 Webby reports and I've already got my 25 full. That means we're sending an additional 3 requests onto business objects. So that's really the only advice that we have, and you'll see it plastered all over the UI screen, the documentation that says use this with caution and be aware that you're putting more load than you've intended onto your business object system. So it's really designed to be used for those really special reports that need to run. The most common pitfall I see are users kind of abusing this queue and adding a lot of work to it, and they run into performance problems within business objects. So let's switch over here. I just wanted to show you where this was located. So this is an admin level feature. So as an administrator, I can go into the settings tab. Down here in system configuration, you'll see a tab here at the end called priority queue. And all you have to do is go out and select your schedule. So here I've got my daily schedule. I say OK, and that's it. It's added to the priority queue. So again, use this with caution. There is documentation here in the help desk. Just search priority queue and you'll find this article. And it walks you through using the queue, potentially editing that queue's length, and then please review these recommendations. We want to make sure that you're using priority queue in such a way that doesn't adversely impact the environment. Okay, that's priority queue. Then our last item is, again, more of an admin feature. It's called system level schedule management. So as you may know, when you create a schedule, you have the ability to disable that schedule, which means don't run that work based on the schedule. But there may be times where you have need to disable all scheduling in your system. I'll give you an example when this is applicable. So let's say I'm going through kind of a testing scenario where I want to take my production repository that's got all my production stuff in it, bursts and XDCs. I want to clone that over to my test server so that I can test maybe an update to InfoBurst or a business objects upgrade or some major change that requires me to validate all my work. Well, when I restore that copy into my test environment, I obviously don't want my scheduled production jobs running from that test server. And they're going to run if all my schedules are enabled. So one thing I can do as an administrator is I can go in at a system level in that test environment and disable everything without having to go in and individually touch every schedule in the UI. I can just turn it all off at a system level, which then allows me to go about safely testing all of my work in that environment. So first off, there is documentation that describes this in the help desk. If you want to note that the article is called Disable Schedule Processing, and you can find it under the System Management section. And this will take you step by step through the process of disabling either time-based or event-based schedules, or both, because they are subtly different, and then reversing that process, which is enabling either time or event-based schedules. So this as a last item, let me just show you what that looks like. So as an administrator, I have access to the server. I would log into my InfoBurst server. I'd open up a command prompt. I change directory, as you see there, into my InfoBurst application root. And then I can leverage what's called the ibconfig utility, and you can see that described here in the article behind. So you don't need to commit all this to memory. It's everything I'm showing you is detailed in that article. But if I wanted to turn off time-based scheduling, I would simply enter the command ibconfig system schedule processing, and I want to set that to false. So I enter that command, InfoBurst tells me OK. And then I'd also like to disable event checking, which means any of my event-based schedules will not run. I can say ibconfig. Apologies for the dog barking in the background. We'll set that to false and OK. Now if I go back over to my service, and you wouldn't normally do this, but I'm running my service in an interactive mode, we can actually see what it looks like when InfoBurst starts up when scheduling has been disabled. So I'll just restart my InfoBurst server, and as this starts up, we can go in and verify that here we can see system schedule processing disabled, no schedules will run. Event processing disabled, no event-based schedules will run. So this is a system-level tool for the administrator to turn everything off so that you're not duplicating production work in a test environment. Okay, and Bree, that's all I've got.
All right. Well, perhaps I should ask the dog in the background if it had any questions, but it doesn't sound like it did.
I think that translates to where's the food.
Well, I don't see any questions at this time, but thank you so much, Bryan. That was awesome. And you know, if there's questions on what he just showed, don't hesitate to enter them in, and we can always address them to Bryan at the end. At this time, I'd like to pass it over to Rajesh, yep, we see your screen, Raj, who's going to be taking us through the InfoBurst roadmap for 2019.
All right. Thank you, Brianna. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Oh, all right. All right. Welcome, everyone. I'll quickly jump into it in the interest of time. So what we are going to discuss today is really about what's coming in 2019. So I'll give you a quick recap of whatever we have developed in 2018, and towards the end of the year, we had a major release with some great features specific to UI, Tableau bursting. I'll quickly cover those as well. And I'd like to discuss what are the key focus areas that we'll spend our development efforts on in 2019, and then I'll get to the roadmap and the timelines. And the following information that's being shared here is to outline some of our current product plans, but like everything else in life, things are subject to change. We are hopeful that the following can shed some light on our roadmap, but it's important to understand that it is being shared for information purposes only, and it is not a binding commitment. Okay, and I'll get to a small part of a demo which ties into the scheduling that Bryan showed, some of the great tips and tricks. It was very helpful for myself as well, and we have something that we can show in our HTML UI for scheduling and monitoring. So InfoBurst recap, in 2018, we had 3 major builds that we released in 2018 in February, May, and the other one towards the end of the year. Sorry for a mistake, this is December 2018. So we had Tableau server that's been natively supported within InfoBurst now. So similar to the way you have your web intelligence filtering, web intelligence bursting, crystal report filtering. We have the same functionality for a Tableau workbook today. That's been a major enhancement specific to our IB tab offering. Then we had a lot more support that was added for cache query with OData. So that was serving some of our Power BI customers, where you can access the cache query that comes out of a web intelligence or a SQL with Power BI. So this is just to give you a recap of what are the features that came in 2019. And the number of features overall that was delivered in 2018, if you can take a guess, it was 41 new features that were delivered in 2018. There were like 10 new features specific to Tableau, 9 new date macros and server macros for Tableau that was added, and admin features plus deliveries and specific to BI and OData. So we had a vast number of features that got delivered in 2018, plus we were also able to get the SAP certification for InfoBurst towards the end of the year. So now when you go to SAP Service Marketplace, you'll find that InfoBurst is now SAP certified for the version that was released end of last year. And specific to the features that got delivered, we made sure that we want to prioritize the idea. We picked the right idea that will be helpful for multiple customers. So it's not just the quantity, it's about the quality that we bring it to the product. If we build a feature that a customer has requested us, will it be helpful for all the other customers who are using InfoBurst? These are the discussions that we have within the team, and my role as a product manager, I promote ideas to features. I don't come up with ideas, I discuss with customers like yourself. And we have a user influence. Some of our customers have some great ideas. We made sure that these user influence ideas are taken into consideration. We had 6 new features that were picked from the user influence. And during IBUS, we had an influence council, and we had some great ideas that was discussed at IBUS. And 2 major features were delivered within end of last year. One is the Tableau dashboard filtering, and then the other one is to make delivery templates, copying and creating multiple delivery templates pretty easy within the UI itself. And on top of it, we did release a particular part of the UI in HTML. So we haven't released the complete UI part. I'll discuss the complete lifecycle on when our UI is planned. But in our 236 released, we have the HTML UI for monitoring and scheduling. And this is not just the same features into a HTML UI. We also added new features in this new UI about analytics, and can it be used on an iPhone? Say you're in a meeting, you want to check the schedules and you want to rerun schedules right away. We got that into the HTML UI, and that was released in our 236. I'm going to show you a quick demo before I jump into what is coming in 2019, and this will tie in with all the scheduling tips and tricks that Bryan showed. So here is our InfoBurst Flex UI that you're using currently, and this will be the primary UI until we move everything to HTML. But in parallel, now you can use a part of this UI in the HTML part, which is the scheduling and monitoring. So for you to monitor schedules, now you go here, you click on this, and sometimes I struggle myself on how do I rerun a schedule? How do I check whether the schedule is expired? And then how do I check an activity log? So we thought of revamping this whole scheduling and monitoring UI, because once you create a burst, this is where you spend a lot of time every morning so that you monitor your schedules. What is going wrong with the schedules? What are the alerts that I get? How can I rerun my schedules? How can I troubleshoot? So here is our new UI, which is released alongside with the Flex UI in 236. So this is where I log in. This is the new login screen, and I go to monitor, and this is my landing screen, the new UI. So you go into analytics, it shows that these are the schedules that are running today. There are like 3 successful schedules, 1 aborted, and then I have 7 successful bursts, 2 aborted. And I can change this using a date range, so that shows a chart here as well. And then I can change, and then this changes accordingly. So right here, I know that, okay, today I have some failure. So I click on the burst, which is successful today. It directly takes to my activity log, which shows, okay, these are the bursts that are completed today. These are the bursts that are aborted right now. So I click on the completed one. I have a number next to it. So when I select this, a number 2 meaning, okay, this burst, which is the dash burst, has run 2 other times other than the 124 PM that I run here. So here I select my activity log. I see what is completed. I can click on the ellipsis. I can click on view details, and you'll see the complete activity log in a new format. So this table is now sortable. You can select actions, and you can monitor all the schedules right here. So this is pretty similar to all the other BI tools out there. So now you can come in, go into the schedule menu. You'll see what are my pending schedules that are awaiting for an event. What are the schedules that are running currently in the system? What are the things that are completed right now? What are the ones that are aborted, expired, and everything? So the idea of our framework is to have a sliding menu on the left, which you can expand and move like this. And then you have a monitor, create, and manage, which is yet to come. So as of now, you can utilize this monitoring UI. And whichever part of UI you are in, say you're creating a burst or you're managing folders, you have an alert icon on the top right side over here. So here it'll show you right away what are the bursts that are reported. So now you can not only open the burst, you can also rerun that particular schedule from this alerting menu. I click on rerun. We have a new rerun UI where you can select, do you want to run only the failed ones? Do you want to run a selected list of bursts? You can select that. Do you want to associate the actions to run? You can select this, and then you can show the actions and other stuff here as well. So this part of the UI, you don't require any training. Pretty straightforward, but you can use this right away. That'll help you in monitoring all the different schedules that you have in your system. So here, say I go to completed, and then here I have an IB schedule. I can click on rerun over here. Okay, do you want to run all the bursts regardless of the status? Maybe there's only one burst that failed. You don't have to rerun the entire schedule. So you can select failed only, and then it'll automatically select whichever one is failed. And then do you want to associate any actions? If you want to click yes, you can go abort, and it shows the action, and then I'll click on run now directly. So these are pretty neat features that will help you in your today's environment. And as and when we have updates and other builds, we'll have the create and manage section, burst UI, and other stuff. So I'll now jump into the roadmap session and what's coming in 2019. So for 2019, first and foremost, we'll support all the major software version releases that are coming with Tableau and business objects, and not to mention the different database versions that we are going to support as well. So we have timed our IB build release dates according to these different software version releases. So once BI 4.3 comes, we'll have access as a beta testing customer. So we know that InfoBurst will be certified for BI 4.3 towards the end of the year. And then what's coming in November for SPO8, we have access before it's released to customers, so we'll certify InfoBurst accordingly. And same with Tableau server versions. And our key focus areas in 2019 is number one, the HTML UI. And in every release going forward, you'll see updates to this HTML UI, but your primary UI will be the Flex. That is the one that you're currently using. But as and when we move certain features, you can start working with the UI or report any issues, bugs, and then we'll fix it while we have the primary UI running. We do have a QA process internally that goes through, but we want to make sure that customers are 100% into the HTML UI before doing this cutover on the Flex UI. So for the next year and 2019 and 2020, we'll have two UIs in parallel, but we'll make sure that this transition is really smooth. That's why we have planned a staggered release for the UI itself. So HTML UI will be our key focus area. And our second focus area is an interesting system altogether, which is the content validation. We have got this request from a lot of customers where, sometimes the email is sent and the damage is done. Maybe it has sent some data that they're not supposed to receive. There was an issue with the report, or there was an issue with the database, or if there's a wrong email ID associated with that particular report. There can be several reasons when a wrong email is sent to some person. So we are designing a system where someone goes and validates the content before the email part is sent. And I'll talk a little bit more once we get closer to the release. That's 237, but I'll give you an overview on what the system is. And we'll focus on InfoBurst portal in the second half of this year. So we are planning to revamp our InfoBurst portal, add new features such as subscription and other stuff. And we are going to tackle object promotion this year. So we'll have only the burst that can be used as a promotion, and later we'll be enhancing our object promotion module going forward in next year. HTML UI release. So right now we are working on the content management section. That's where your objects and folders are being managed. And one neat feature that will be released in our next one with the content management is you're going to have a recycle bin for InfoBurst. So anything gets deleted, anything that you accidentally deleted, you have an option to restore content from this recycle bin. And this will be released only in the HTML UI. We are trying to minimize the development on the Flex. So any new feature or the requests that come in, we try to squeeze into our timeline for the HTML UI. And then you'll have our Burst Part 1 that will be released sometime during IBIS, and then we'll have our macro builder delivery templates as a Burst Part 2, and then the final stage will be the users and platform. So by this year, our plan is to include only IB Publish and IB Tab in this HTML UI. We will not be tackling XDC by this year, but we'll start the groundwork, and you'll see XDC improvements and enhancements in the HTML UI early next year. Content validation, like I said, we have a plan to approve and reject content, and not just approve and reject before sending the emails. We are also planning to extend this as a backup for all the different formats and delivery destinations that we have. Say someone says, I don't receive the email. Now you can go to the system and then resend a particular email directly. This way you avoid people saying that, okay, I haven't received this one particular email. Maybe there's one particular customer who didn't receive their PDF via filtering. You don't have to rerun the entire burst or take it from a backup system. We will have this content validation system where you can go and resend just that particular person rather than rerunning the whole burst. So we'll have a demo as we get closer to the release in 2.37. So we'll talk in detail on how the system will function in your environment. IB Portal, we have some more new features that we are planning. Number one is portal as a separate instance. We have had this request in the past from customers, and we want to have more users start using our portal if it's deployed as a separate instance. So that is something that we'll work on. Plus the subscription to documents delivered to portal is what we'll tackle this year. Object promotion, our plan is to use it as a phased approach. So for now, we'll tackle only the Burst UI for object promotion. So these are the 4 different key focus areas that we'll do in 2019. And a feature list with all the other features that you'll see in every release is IB 237, which we are planning by end of April. You'll see HTML UI with object and folder management. You're going to get a new recycle bin option in this HTML UI. We'll have SPO7 support. Right now, SPO7 is in beta. We are a beta customer for 4.2 SPO7, but if it's released to customers, we'll certify that in 2.37. A bunch of Tableau features, as and when it gets added to SDK, we'll add it to our product as well. And content validation will be a major thing that'll be released in 2.37. And we will have a dedicated session just to demo this content validation as we get closer to the release of 2.37. And 2.38 will have more updates to our HTML UI and specifically our Burst UI, which is the biggest InfoBurst element that can be designed in this HTML. So we are planning to tackle this Burst UI as soon as possible so that customers can try out the different burst properties, different combination of documents within a burst. So we'll have a beta release in 2.38, and we'll add more functionalities as we go towards the end of this year. We'll have actions, events, macro builders. So our main focus will remain HTML UI and a couple of other features such as platform for Oracle 18c, IP portal as a separate instance. And specifically in terms of delivery, we are planning to check in the cloud delivery options like Box.com or Google Drive or AWS. So for now, we have decided let's start with Box.com integration. So this is something we'll take a look into our 2.38 release. And our third release for the year will have a final version of our HTML UI for publish and tab customers. So this will include user management, platform management, and then we'll handle object promotion in 239 as well. So we are going to do only the burst promotion element, and this will be in the HTML UI. And we'll have an archival content management. So apart from the email deferred delivery that will be released in 237, we are planning to extend that as a content management archival or a backup mechanism for InfoBurst delivered documents. So that's what we'll handle in 239. And in terms of timeline, in January, you might know that we already had a build 236 SP1 GR, and 236 already has the new UI that can be used for scheduling and monitoring. And end of April is when we are targeting our build 237 GR. This will have our content management of the deferred delivery system. In June, we'll have our IBIS, so we'll have customer influence sessions, and that will impact what are the things that are going to be released in our product by rest of this year. And based on the feedback that we get for the 237 release, we might add some enhancements as we go through it. And that is subject to change based on our development effort and timelines. July, we'll plan our 238. So this is timed after IBIS, so that we'll have a beta release of Burst. So during IBIS, you will get a glimpse of how our Burst UI is going to look like and how a revamped Burst macro builder or delivery features will be included in the product. So you'll get an opportunity to see what's coming in the UI in action during IBIS. And then in July, you'll have a beta release for the Burst UI. October will be our release for 239, end of October again, and this will plan with the IB publish and IB tab GR in the HTML UI. So this is our roadmap for this year. And throughout this process, my role with InfoSol and the InfoBurst team is to building this product roadmap, customizing the releases, and prioritizing what comes in the product, what is useful for you as a customer who are using InfoBurst first. So it's targeted towards customers. I'll be the voice of the customer. Any request, anything that comes through help desk, Bryan and I will work with you. We have our user influence forum. You would have noticed that we are looking into ideas that you post into user influence, and we'll have other forum materials for you to try out as a beta customer for HTML UI. If you're interested, please let me know, and then we can give you a separate early release of the HTML UI so that you can provide us feedback or report any bugs as we go through it. Here's my email ID, but user influence and the help desk is the best way to reach, and I'll be involved with you as and when you have any other questions. I think we are right about time, and if you have any questions on the roadmap, what's coming in 2019, or any questions for Bryan, I think we have about 9 minutes to handle.
Yes, definitely. Feel free, even if you have some comments or feedback on what you saw today, we're all open to hearing it. And if there happens to be questions after, please don't hesitate to reach out. As we continue these, definitely you'll receive a notification for when the recording is ready if you'd like to review it or socialize it within your organization. And I know this is, a business objects user groups, but we do intend this year to really unify all of our happenings at InfoSol, whether it's IBIS and attending the InfoBurst experience with experts like Rajesh and Bryan Baca and team, or attending these business objects user groups. InfoSol definitely tries to put ourselves out there as a leader in the free educational space of business objects, and looking to really listen to the community this year, and as Rajesh said, grow in those aspects. So definitely, if you happen to be in these areas, tune into our free business objects user groups, their educational sessions. Sometimes it's with a free breakfast or lunch, and it's a great way to network with other business objects and InfoBurst users. So we do have AZBOCUG coming up in Phoenix, February 14th. Tucson is going to be March 14th. We're going to be visiting the Bay Area in Santa Clara, March 15th, and then North Carolina on the 22nd of March. And stay tuned. Our events.infosol.com is also another source for our InfoBurst community to tune into the webinar series as well as the help desk. So I'm sure most of you are members of the help desk and tune into there. That's where the latest and greatest of InfoBurst is posted by Bryan Baca and Rajesh. And as far as the webinars go, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to coordinate with Rajesh and Bryan and the InfoBurst team on any topic requests that you're really looking to expand your usage of InfoBurst. We would love to hear that information and feedback. So don't hesitate to reach out, and I'll coordinate with the InfoBurst team. But at this time, I don't see any questions. I'd like to thank you, Bryan and Rajesh, for our kickoff webinar series. And at this time, it will conclude our first webinar of the new year for today. Just to let you know, April 3rd, stay tuned, will be our next InfoBurst webinar. Thanks, guys.